In the world of professional wrestling, few figures were as beloved and culturally significant as the Junkyard Dog. Born Sylvester Ritter, JYD wasn't just a powerhouse in the ring, he was a movement. His charisma was nuclear, his entrance music made arenas shake, and his signature chain was more iconic than half the Intercontinental Champions of the 1980s. But for every bone he body slammed and every head he butted, there was a part of JYD's legacy that lived backstage, in grudges, frustrations, and outright hatred. Yes, while fans cheered his every move, JYD was quietly building a list of people who made his blood boil more than a steel cage match in July. This wasn't your garden variety wrestler beef either. These were real, venomous, occasionally racial or financial feuds that wouldn't have been out of place in a soap opera written by Quentin Tarantino. Now, let's set the record straight before someone tries to lock us in a Figure 4 lawsuit. JYD wasn't a petty man. He was known for being fiercely loyal, a defender of his people, and a guy who would take a bullet for a brother before he'd stiff them in the ring. But like any man trying to navigate an industry fueled by ego, politics, and cocaine binges, he encountered his fair share of enemies. And unlike the Ultimate Warrior, who we are excluding at JYD's ghostly request, these enemies didn't just irritate him, they genuinely made him want to use that big steel chain for something other than theatrics. So let's grab a folding chair, cue the Another One Bites the Dust entrance theme, and march down memory lane to explore the top 5 wrestlers. The Junkyard Dog absolutely hated. These aren't just petty locker room squabbles or blown spots. These are full-blown beefs, cooked well done and served with a side of sass. Because when the dog growled backstage, even the toughest heels knew, don't mess with the mutt. Tony Atlas, the man with muscles sculpted by the gods and the personality of a wet gym sock. If there was anyone who could match Junkyard Dog in raw strength and presence, it was Atlas. And maybe that's exactly why the two never got along. Their relationship was less tag team and more two pit bulls eyeing the same steak. Behind the scenes, the two were embroiled in a Cold War fueled by pride, ego, and the kind of subtle shade that could wilt Hulk Hogan's mustache. The core of their feud stemmed from a toxic cocktail of racial representation and competition. In the early 80s, promoters often treated African American wrestlers like interchangeable trading cards. You couldn't have two of them in the spotlight at once, or else the white Southern crowd might realize that black wrestlers were better athletes, more charismatic, and infinitely more stylish. JYD was the top black babyface in Mid-South, and when Atlas came sniffing around for a similar spotlight in WWF, the dog saw red. Atlas's sudden push felt like a threat, a torch grab before the flame had even dimmed. According to shoot interviews and behind-the-curtain legends, JYD openly dismissed Atlas as an opportunist who talked big but couldn't back it up in the ring. He reportedly referred to Atlas as the dumbest body in the locker room, a man so dense even a steel chair shot wouldn't make a dent. Atlas, for his part, wasn't shy either. He criticized JYD's conditioning, claiming he was out of shape, and suggested that the dog only got over because white fans found him safe. In the end, JYD never forgot. Years after both had left their prime, he still refused to work shows with Atlas. One promoter recalled being told, "If Tony's on the card, the dog don't bark." That, my friends, is pettiness worthy of a pay-per-view. Ah yes, Michael P.S. Hayes, the man whose initials stood for Pure Sass, or Please Shut Up, depending on who you asked backstage. A founding member of the fabulous Freebirds, Hayes had more swagger than sense and a mouth that ran faster than a cocaine-fueled Ultimate Warrior promo. While fans adored the rock and roll bravado of Hayes and his stable, the Junkyard Dog saw something else. A man who wrapped himself in Southern rock and Confederate colors while treating black wrestlers like stagehands in his delusional Lynyrd Skynyrd musical. The heat between JYD and Hayes wasn't just about personality, it was personal, racial, and steeped in the politics of the Southern territories. In Mid-South wrestling, JYD was the face of the promotion, while Hayes represented everything wrong with wrestling's Confederate cosplay culture. According to Jim Cornette in shoot interviews, Hayes never hid his disdain for sharing the spotlight with a black man who wasn't there to play second fiddle. While Hayes and the Freebirds played rebel rockers, JYD played himself, a proud, chain-swinging juggernaut who wasn't going to shuck, jive, or job for anyone's racial gimmick. There were real tensions backstage. In one incident recounted on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, Hayes allegedly used racially insensitive language about JYD in front of other wrestlers. Word got back to the dog, and while he didn't swing his chain, he made it known that if Hayes ever pulled that again, the next thing he'd hear would be his own ribs cracking. Even decades later, in interviews with wrestlers like Butch Reed and Tony Atlas, there's a consistent through line. Hayes was slick, arrogant, and just southern enough to be problematic. And then there was the Freebird rule, the stipulation that allowed any two Freebirds to defend tag belts. JYD viewed it as a gimmick crutch that let Hayes hide his own ring weaknesses while hogging the mic. Hayes thought JYD was too limited. JYD thought Hayes was a walking mayonnaise jar with a mullet. It was mutual disdain dressed up in kayfabe. By the time both men found themselves in WWF, the grudge was cold but not forgotten. Hayes went on to be a producer. JYD went on to be a legend. But had they shared a locker room after dark, even Vince might have needed a security detail. Because when it came to Michael Hayes, JYD didn't just smell a rat. He smelled a whole roadhouse full of them. If Ric Flair was the nature boy, Buddy Landell was the nature's afterthought. Known for swagger, bleached blonde arrogance, and a world-class delusion that could only come from snorting powdered ego off a turnbuckle pad, Landell's career was basically Flair fan fiction gone horribly wrong. And for the Junkyard Dog, Buddy Landell wasn't just annoying, he was everything wrong with self-entitled wrestlers in spandex with more promos than push-ups. Their feud wasn't about fame or belts, it was about respect, or more precisely, the sheer lack of it. Landell strutted into Mid-South wrestling like he was God's gift to the business. Meanwhile, JYD was out there selling out the Superdome and doing more community outreach than a city council. Landell, ever the backstage peacock, would reportedly mock JYD's popularity, claiming that fans only loved him because he danced like a trained bear and had theme music louder than his cardio. Sources like Jim Ross's podcast and shoot interviews with wrestlers like Dutch Mantell confirm that Landell often rubbed his colleagues the wrong way, but with JYD, he rubbed so hard it turned into metaphorical chafing. During one taping in the mid-'80s, Landell is said to have mocked JYD for his weight backstage. The dog, not one to take insults lightly, responded by knocking over a water cooler and threatening to chain whip the peroxide off his scalp. JYD saw Landell as a man handed opportunity after opportunity, despite botching nearly everyone. Drugs, arrogance, and the uncanny ability to punch himself in the career saw Landell bounce from promotion to promotion. JYD once joked to a promoter, "The only thing Buddy's consistent at is being unemployed." While other wrestlers eventually buried the hatchet with Landell, JYD never seemed to forgive or forget. The dog believed in earning respect, not bleaching your hair and crying into a mirror until someone gave you a belt. Landell's antics backstage and on the mic were like nails on a chalkboard to someone who'd clawed his way through the Southern territories facing real adversity. Landell would later admit in interviews that he may have gone too far with some of his jokes and had probably pissed off the dog more than once. That's like saying you probably annoyed Godzilla while juggling Tokyo Tower. By the time Landell passed away, JYD was long gone. But if ghosts hold grudges, somewhere out there a chain is still rattling in disapproval. Bill Watts, the promoter of Mid-South Wrestling, played a pivotal role in JYD's career. However, their relationship deteriorated when Watts allegedly made racist comments, referring to JYD with a racial slur. This incident reportedly prompted JYD to leave Mid-South Wrestling for the WWF, seeking a more respectful environment. As a commentator, Jesse Ventura often made derogatory remarks about JYD, describing his speech as sounding like he had a mouth full of grits, and referring to his dance moves as shuckin' and jivin'. While Ventura played a heel commentator, his comments were seen as racially insensitive, contributing to JYD's disdain for him. What really ticked the dog off, though, was Ventura's tendency to rewrite history. In shoot interviews and even in his book, Ventura paints himself as one of the few voices standing up for the downtrodden boys in the back, but many, including JYD, saw that as revisionist wrestling fiction. He spoke up when the cameras were rolling, one unnamed former WWF road agent said. Otherwise, he was just another guy playing politics in neon. There's also the matter of respect, or lack thereof. Ventura was known to refer to JYD as a cartoon character in commentary, even years after JYD left the WWF. Whether it was a rib or just Jesse being Jesse, JYD took that as a slap. "You call yourself the body?" he once said. "More like the mouth that never shuts up." Needless to say, these two were never going to hug it out at a Hall of Fame ceremony. One was a growling brawler from the streets, the other a preening ex-Navy SEAL turned conspiracy podcaster. The only thing they had in common? A shared distaste for each other. And there we have it. The top 5 wrestlers that the Junkyard Dog absolutely hated and couldn't stand. These aren't just fleeting disagreements or minor locker room squabbles. These were full-on, high-stakes rivalries that simmered, boiled, and occasionally exploded in ways that would have made even the most hardened heels in the business cringe. But this is the world of professional wrestling, a world where egos are as big as the stage, and the personal lives of the stars often intertwine with the dramatic performances we see on TV. In the end, the Junkyard Dog didn't just leave an indelible mark on the wrestling world through his in-ring accomplishments. He did it through his personality, his grit, and his refusal to back down. These 5 mentioned here, while central to this video, were merely footnotes in the larger story of a man who carved his own path in the annals of wrestling history. And whether you loved him or hated him, one thing was certain: no one could ever ignore the dog. Thanks for watching.